Welcome to Black Millionaire Love Stories. Before the story sweeps you away, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. If our tales touch your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the love. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. A poor single mother falls asleep on a billionaire's shoulder. What he does next will shock you. The gentle hum of the airplane engines filled the cabin as Aurora Monroe tried to keep her eyes open. Her reflection in the small window showed the exhaustion she'd been fighting for weeks, no, months. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, a stark contrast against her warm brown skin. She blinked slowly, watching the clouds drift by outside, each one carrying a fragment of her hopes toward Seattle, where her son Mason waited. Just a few more hours, she whispered to herself, clutching her worn leather handbag closer. Inside was a small photo album containing every precious picture she had of Mason, her beautiful 5-year-old boy with curious eyes and an infectious laugh. The last time she'd heard that laugh was exactly 7 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days ago. The flight attendant's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing turbulence ahead. Aurora barely registered the words, her mind drifting between consciousness and sleep. Her body ached from working double shifts at the diner and the consulting firm, a peculiar combination that had become her lifeline after Thomas left her with nothing but debt and heartache. As the plane hit a rough patch, Aurora's head nodded forward, then sideways, finally coming to rest on something firm yet surprisingly comfortable. In her exhausted haze, she didn't realize she had landed on her seatmate's shoulder. James Warrington stiffened at the unexpected contact. He glanced down at the woman who had just made his shoulder her pillow, his initial irritation melting away as he observed her peaceful features. Even in sleep, there was something striking about her, a quiet determination etched into the curve of her jaw, the slight furrow of her brow. The scent of Chanel Coco Mademoiselle drifted up to him, a fragrance that seemed both elegant and fierce, much like its wearer. His own Tom Ford oud would created an unexpected harmony in their shared space. For a moment, James considered waking her, maintaining the careful distance he always kept from others, but something stopped him. Perhaps it was the way her hands clutched that old handbag, or the slight tremor in her breathing that suggested she was carrying a weight far heavier than physical exhaustion. Whatever it was, it stirred something in him, a protective instinct he thought he'd buried along with his brother's memory. The plane continued its journey through turbulent skies, but James remained perfectly still, unconsciously adjusting his position to provide better support for his sleeping companion. His mind wandered to the board meeting waiting for him in Seattle, the endless parade of responsibilities that came with being CEO of Warrington Industries. Yet, for the first time in years, those concerns felt distant, overshadowed by the mysterious woman whose trust he'd inadvertently earned, if only in sleep. Halfway through the flight, Aurora stirred slightly. Seattle's perpetual drizzle matched Aurora's mood as she stared at her phone screen, rereading Thomas's latest message, Mason not feeling well. Visit postponed. The words blurred as tears threatened to fall, but she blinked them back. 5 hours of flight, 3 months of saving, countless overtime shifts, all for another cruel disappointment. Standing under the airport's covered walkway, she watched as travelers reunited with their loved ones, each embrace a reminder of what she couldn't have. Her fingers traced the edge of Mason's photo in her wallet, his bright smile frozen in time. The image was slightly worn at the corners from how often she touched it, seeking comfort in her darkest moments. Ms. Monroe. The deep voice startled her. Turning around, she found herself face to face with the man from the plane, her unintentional pillow. In the harsh fluorescent lighting of the airport, he looked even more imposing than she remembered. His tailored charcoal suit spoke of wealth and influence, while his steel-rimmed glasses couldn't quite hide the intensity of his blue-gray eyes. "I apologize for the intrusion," he continued, his voice carrying a hint of uncertainty that seemed at odds with his commanding presence. "I'm James Warrington. You fell asleep on my shoulder during the flight." Heat rushed to Aurora's cheeks. "Oh God, I'm so sorry about that. I was completely exhausted and—" "Please, don't apologize." He adjusted his glasses, a gesture she would later learn meant he was gathering courage. "I actually wanted to talk to you." Would you consider having coffee with me? Every instinct, honed by her bitter experience with Thomas, screamed at her to decline. Rich men in expensive suits didn't offer coffee to random women out of kindness. But something in James's expression, a vulnerability beneath the polished exterior, made her hesitate. I don't think that's a good idea, she said finally, gripping her handbag tighter. I appreciate the offer, but I know about Mason. The words stopped her cold. Excuse me. James's expression softened. You were talking in your sleep, about your son, about the custody battle, and, he paused, choosing his words carefully. About Thomas Caldwell. Aurora's world tilted. Thomas's name from this stranger's lips felt like a violation. I need to go, she said, turning away. Wait, please. James moved to block her path, maintaining a respectful distance, but his presence was impossible to ignore. I'm not trying to upset you. I want to help. Help? Aurora laughed bitterly. Let me guess, out of the goodness of your heart. No, his honesty surprised her. Because I recognize the look in your eyes. It's the same one I see in the mirror every morning, someone haunted by what they've lost. The rain intensified outside, its steady rhythm filling the silence between them. Aurora studied him, trying to read past the perfectly curated image. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Warrington? Let me help you fight for your son. He reached into his jacket, producing a business card made of thick, cream-colored stock. I have resources, connections, things that could level the playing field against Thomas Caldwell. And what would you want in return? The question came out sharper than intended, edged with years of learned suspicion. James's response was unexpected. A chance. A chance for what? To prove that not everyone with power abuses it. To show you that sometimes help comes without hidden agendas. He paused, then added quietly, and maybe to finally do something worthwhile with all these resources I've accumulated. A group of tourists passed by, their excited chatter creating a brief bubble of normalcy around them. Aurora used the moment to think, to really look at the man before her. Beyond the obvious wealth and status, she saw something familiar, a deep-seated pain carefully hidden behind social graces and designer clothes. Why me? She asked finally. Why this particular random woman who happened to fall asleep on your shoulder? James's response was barely audible above the airport's ambient noise. Because you trusted me enough to sleep on my shoulder when your world was falling apart. And because, he hesitated, removing his glasses to clean them, another nervous gesture. Because I haven't been able to trust anyone since my brother died. But something about you makes me want to try. The raw honesty in his voice caught Aurora off guard. She looked down at the business card in her hand, the embossed letters catching the light, James Warrington, CEO, Warrington Industries. Power radiated from those simple words, power that could potentially help her fight for Mason. But she'd learned the hard way that power could corrupt, that help always came with strings attached. Her fingers traced the edge of the card, feeling its weight, the weight of a decision that could change everything. I need time to think, she said finally. James nodded, replacing his glasses. Of course. My private number is on the back. When you're ready, if you're ready, call me. He turned to leave, then paused. And Ms. Monroe? I'm sorry about today's visit being cancelled. No parent should have to endure that pain. Aurora watched him walk away, his tall figure disappearing into the crowd of travelers. The business card felt heavy in her hand, laden with possibilities and dangers. Outside, Seattle's rain continued its relentless pattern, washing away certainties and leaving only questions in its wake. That night, in her modest hotel room, Aurora lay awake staring at the ceiling. Mason's photo rested on the nightstand, his smile seeming to ask what she would do to bring them back together. The business card sat next to it, James Warrington's name a promise or perhaps a threat in the dim light. Her phone buzzed with another message from Thomas. Mason's feeling better now, but my lawyer advises against visits until the custody situation is resolved. Aurora's fingers clenched around her phone, rage and helplessness warring inside her. Across the room, her reflection in the hotel mirror showed a woman at a crossroads, the strong, independent person who'd rebuilt her life from scratch after Thomas's betrayal, the mother who would move heaven and earth for her child, the woman who'd woken up feeling inexplicably safe on a stranger's shoulder. She reached for the business card, running her thumb over the raised letters. The choice before her was clear: continue fighting a losing battle alone, or take a risk on someone who might either be her salvation or her downfall. Outside her window, Seattle's lights twinkled through the rain, each one a star in an urban galaxy of possibilities. Somewhere in this city, her son slept in a bed she hadn't tucked him into for months. And somewhere else, a man in steel-rimmed glasses waited for her to make a decision that would change all their lives forever. Aurora picked up her phone, her fingers hovering over the keypad. Sometimes, she thought, the biggest risks came disguised as simple choices, like falling asleep on a stranger's shoulder, like dialing a number that could lead to everything or nothing, like trusting one more time when trust had already cost her everything she held dear. 3 days later, Aurora found herself standing in the sleek lobby of Warrington Industries, feeling distinctly out of place among the gleaming marble and floor-to-ceiling windows. Her reflection in the polished surfaces showed a woman trying too hard to belong, her best black dress suddenly feeling inadequate, her carefully styled hair a desperate attempt at projecting confidence she didn't feel. The security guard's voice cut through her thoughts. "Ms. Monroe. Mr. Warrington will see you now. Top floor." The elevator ride to the 45th floor gave Aurora time to question her decision yet again. After spending 2 sleepless nights wrestling with James's offer, she'd finally called him, half expecting the number to be fake. Instead, his deep voice had answered on the second ring, as if he'd been waiting. The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area, where a poised woman in her 50s greeted her with practiced efficiency. "Ms. Monroe, welcome. I'm Victoria, Mr. Warrington's executive assistant. Please follow me." James's office was a study in understated power, all clean lines and panoramic views of Seattle's skyline. He stood as she entered, and Aurora noticed how the gray clouds outside matched his eyes. Today's suit was navy, impeccably tailored, but something about his slightly loosened tie suggested he'd been working since dawn. "Ms. Monroe, thank you for coming," his voice carried the same quiet intensity she remembered from the airport. "Would you like coffee? Tea?" "Coffee, black," she replied, taking the seat he offered. "And please call me Aurora. If we're going to discuss my life falling apart, we might as well be on first-name terms." A flicker of appreciation crossed his face at her directness. He prepared her coffee himself rather than calling Victoria, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed. As he handed her the cup, their fingers brushed briefly, sending an unexpected current through her skin. "I've been looking into your situation," he said, settling behind his desk. "Thomas Caldwell's legal maneuvers are impressive, in the worst possible way." Aurora's grip tightened on the coffee cup. "He systematically destroyed every chance I have of getting custody. Every time I save enough for legal fees, something happens: my car breaks down, my rent increases, my hours get cut. It's not coincidence." "No, it's not." James's jaw tightened. "He's using his connections to wear you down. But he made one mistake." "What's that?" "He didn't count on you meeting someone with better connections." James pressed a button on his desk, and the wall behind him transformed into a screen. Documents appeared: bank statements, court filings, emails. Aurora's heart raced as she recognized Thomas's signature on papers she'd never seen before. "He's been hiding assets," James explained, his voice controlled but edged with anger, "moving money through shell companies, manipulating evidence to paint you as an unfit mother. My team found irregularities in his company's books going back 3 years." Aurora stood, moving closer to the screen. "How did you get all this?" "Legally, I assure you. Thomas is not the only one with resources." He paused, watching her process the information. "But exposing his financial fraud is just the beginning. We need to prove he's using his position to manipulate the custody arrangement. We. The word hung between them, heavy with implication. James rose, coming to stand beside her. This close, she could smell his cologne, that same sophisticated scent from the plane that somehow made her feel both unsettled and safe. Yes, his voice softened, unless you've changed your mind about accepting my help. Aurora turned to face him, suddenly aware of their proximity. Why are you really doing this, James? And don't give me that line about wanting to do something worthwhile. There are plenty of worthy causes that don't involve getting personally involved in a messy custody battle. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the carefully maintained facade. He moved to the window, staring out at the rain-soaked city below. My brother Adrian was 16 when he died, he said quietly. I was 22, already working here, too busy building my empire to notice he was struggling. Our father, he trailed off, removing his glasses to pinch the bridge of his nose. Our father was like Thomas, powerful, manipulative, cruel behind closed doors. Adrian couldn't take it anymore. One night, he just didn't come home. The pain in his voice was raw, decades old but still bleeding. Aurora found herself moving closer, drawn by the vulnerability he was finally showing. It wasn't your fault, she said softly. Wasn't it? He turned back to her, his eyes intense. I had the power to help him, to get him away from our father, but I was too focused on proving myself, on becoming everything our father wanted. By the time I realized what really mattered, it was too late. Understanding dawned. And now you see Mason in Adrian. I see a chance to not fail another child, to use my power for something other than making money and closing deals. He stepped closer, his presence both comforting and overwhelming. But it's more than that. When you fell asleep on my shoulder, trusting a complete stranger, it was the first real human connection I'd allowed myself since Adrian died. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Aurora felt tears threatening to fall, not for herself this time, but for the broken man before her who'd built an empire to hide his pain. I can't promise to fix everything, he continued, but I can promise to fight alongside you, to use every resource I have to help you get your son back. No strings attached, no hidden agenda. There are always strings, Aurora whispered, even as something in her heart began to soften. Then let me prove you wrong. He reached for a folder on his desk, offering it to her. This contains everything we've found so far, plus a preliminary strategy for my legal team. Take it home, review it. If you decide to trust me, we'll start tomorrow. Their fingers touched again as she took the folder, and this time neither pulled away immediately. In that brief moment of contact, something passed between them, an understanding, a possibility, a dangerous spark of hope. One condition, Aurora said finally, clutching the folder to her chest. Name it. No more perfect suits and corporate offices. If we're going to work together, I need to know the real James Warrington, not just the CEO version. A genuine smile transformed his face, making him look younger, more approachable. Deal. Dinner tomorrow? I know a place that makes mac and cheese that might actually rival yours. Aurora couldn't help but smile back, even as her heart warned her about the dangerous territory she was entering. How did you know about my mac and cheese? You mentioned it in your sleep, something about comfort food and missing Mason. The simple observation touched her deeply, that he not only listened while she slept but remembered such a small detail. Maybe, just maybe, this man was different from Thomas. Or maybe she was walking straight into another heartbreak, this time with even more to lose. As she left his office, the folder heavy in her arms, Aurora caught her reflection in the elevator's mirrored walls. The woman looking back at her seemed different somehow, still cautious, still wounded, but with a dangerous glimmer of hope in her eyes. Seattle's eternal rain had finally stopped, leaving the city gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Standing on the sidewalk outside Warrington Industries, Aurora looked up at the towering glass building, knowing James was probably watching her leave. One thought echoed in her mind: sometimes the biggest risks came with the highest rewards, and sometimes, just sometimes, sleeping on a stranger's shoulder could change everything. The restaurant wasn't what Aurora expected. Instead of the upscale establishment she'd imagined, James had chosen a cozy bistro tucked away in one of Seattle's older neighborhoods. Exposed brick walls, mismatched vintage furniture, and the smell of comfort food created an atmosphere that felt deliberately chosen to put her at ease. James was already there when she arrived, and the sight of him made her pause in the doorway. Gone was the perfect corporate armor. Instead, he wore dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that somehow made him look both more approachable and more handsome. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd run his fingers through it in a moment of uncertainty. "You look different," she said as she slid into the booth across from him. "Good different or bad different?" He smiled, adjusting his glasses in that now familiar nervous gesture. "Just, real." She studied him in the warm lighting. "Though I have to admit, I half expected you to cancel. CEOs usually don't have time for casual dinners." "I cleared my schedule." The simple statement carried weight. "Victoria nearly had a heart attack when I moved 3 board meetings." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of 2 steaming plates of mac and cheese, the aroma making Aurora's mouth water. She took a bite and couldn't suppress a smile. "Okay, this is good. Not better than mine, but close. I'll have to try yours someday to make a fair comparison." The words hung between them, full of unspoken possibilities. As they ate, Aurora noticed how James would occasionally glance at his phone, each time seeming to force himself to ignore whatever messages were coming through. It touched her that he was trying so hard to be present, to step out of his CEO role. "You can check those if you need to," she offered. "I know running an empire doesn't stop for dinner." He shook his head. "They can wait. I wanted tonight to be about getting to know each other, not business." He paused, then added softly, "Though I did receive some interesting information about Thomas this afternoon." Aurora's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "What kind of information?" "He's planning to move to Chicago." James's voice was gentle but firm. "With Mason." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Chicago? Nearly 2,000 miles away." Her fork clattered to the plate as the room began to spin. "When?" 3 weeks. He's accepting a position with a rival company." James leaned forward, his eyes intense. "But, Aurora, this might actually work in our favor. The timing of the move, combined with the evidence we've gathered about his financial manipulation, it strengthens our case that he's acting in bad faith." She barely heard him over the roaring in her ears. Chicago. Mason would be in Chicago. The distance felt like an abyss opening beneath her feet. "I need some air," she managed to say, standing abruptly. James was immediately beside her, his hand hovering near her elbow but not quite touching. He guided her through the restaurant to a small courtyard in the back, where fairy lights twinkled in the early evening darkness. The cool air helped clear her head, but the panic remained. "I can't lose him, James. Not like this, not to Chicago." "You won't." His voice carried absolute conviction. "I promise you, Aurora, we won't let that happen." She turned to face him, anger suddenly flaring. "Don't make promises you can't keep. You don't know Thomas like I do. He always wins, always." "Not this time." James stepped closer, and in the soft glow of the fairy lights, she could see the steel in his eyes. "Because this time, he's not just fighting you, he's fighting us." The word "us" echoed in her heart, dangerous and tempting. "Why do you care so much? Really? And don't tell me it's just about Adrian." For a long moment, James was silent, seemingly wrestling with something inside himself. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and intense. "Because when you fell asleep on my shoulder that day, something broke in me, some wall I'd built so high and strong that I'd forgotten it was there." He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up further. "Do you know how long it's been since I let anyone close enough to see the real me? To make me want to be more than just the CEO, the machine, the man who buried his heart with his brother?" The raw honesty in his voice made her breath catch. James. I know the timing is terrible, he continued. I know you have every reason not to trust me, or any man, especially one with power. But I can't pretend this is just about helping you get Mason back anymore. It's about, he trailed off as a drop of rain hit his cheek, then another. The fairy lights blurred as the drizzle intensified, but neither of them moved to go inside. About what? Aurora whispered, her heart pounding. Instead of answering, James reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. His fingers brushed her cheek, wiping away what might have been rain or tears. The touch was electric, sending shivers down her spine. About the way you look at me, like you see past all the walls, he said finally. About how your strength makes me want to be stronger. About how, for the first time since Adrian died, I feel something real. The rain was falling steadily now, soaking through their clothes, but Aurora couldn't move, couldn't break this moment that felt balanced on a knife's edge between possibility and disaster. I can't, she whispered, even as she leaned slightly into his touch. I can't feel this, not now, not when everything with Mason is so precarious. I know. His hand dropped away, but he didn't step back. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know, to understand why I'm in this fight with you completely and without reservation. A crash of thunder made them both jump, breaking the spell. James shrugged out of his sweater, draping it over her shoulders despite her protests. The gesture was so simple, so protective, it made her heart ache. We should go inside, he said softly. Yeah. But she didn't move. Instead, she found herself reaching up to wipe a raindrop from his glasses. The intimacy of the gesture surprised them both. They stood there in the rain, two broken people on the edge of something that could either heal or destroy them. James, her voice was barely audible above the rain, I'm scared. The admission cost her, but it felt right to say it, not just of losing Mason, of this, whatever this is. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. I know. Me too. Inside, their abandoned mac and cheese grew cold, forgotten in the wake of truths finally spoken. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away pretenses and leaving only raw honesty in its wake. And somewhere in Chicago, plans were being made that would test every promise, every connection, every fragile thread of trust being woven between them. The storm was just beginning. The morning headlines hit like a thunderbolt: Warrington Air's dark secret, the death that haunts Seattle's most eligible bachelor. Aurora's hands shook as she read the article on her phone, each word more devastating than the last. The piece painted James as responsible for Adrian's death, twisting his brother's suicide into a tale of neglect and callous ambition. Even worse, it implied his current interest in Mason's custody case was driven by guilt rather than genuine concern. The source was clear, even though unnamed: Thomas. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call, James. She hesitated before answering, remembering their rain-soaked conversation from 3 nights ago. They hadn't seen each other since, both needing time to process the intensity of what had passed between them. Have you seen it? His voice was tight, controlled. Yes. She closed her eyes, picturing him in his office, probably pacing. James, I'm so sorry. Don't be. It was inevitable. A pause, then, but there's more. Check your email. She did, finding a forwarded message from Thomas. Her blood ran cold as she read, "Back off, Warrington. You couldn't save your brother, what makes you think you can save her son? Walk away now, or everyone will learn exactly how Adrian died that night. And trust me, the truth is worse than the papers know." He's bluffing, Aurora said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. No, he's not. James's response was barely audible. There are things about that night, things I've never told anyone. The pain in his voice made her heart clench. Tell me. Not over the phone. Can you meet me? 20 minutes later, Aurora found herself in a place she hadn't expected, James's home. The modern mansion overlooking Lake Washington should have been impressive, but all she could focus on was how empty it felt, no family photos, no personal touches, just expensive furniture and echoing spaces. James stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, his usual perfect appearance notably disheveled. His tie hung loose, shirt sleeves rolled up, hair a mess from running his fingers through it. When he turned to face her, the raw vulnerability in his eyes took her breath away. "Adrian didn't just kill himself," he said without preamble. "He tried to talk to me first, called me at the office that night." Aurora moved closer, close enough to catch the faint scent of his cologne mixed with something stronger, whiskey. A glass sat half empty on the windowsill. I was in a meeting," he continued, his voice hollow, "a crucial merger. I told my assistant to take a message." His laugh was bitter. "A message? My brother was crying for help, and I asked for a message. You couldn't have known." When I finally checked my voicemail hours later, his last words to me were, "I can't take it anymore, Elle. I need you." That's what he called me, Elle, no one else ever did. He picked up the whiskey glass but didn't drink. By the time I got to his favorite spot on the bridge, it was too late. The police were already there. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. Neither of them moved to clean it up. "Thomas found out," James said, his voice raw. "Somehow, he got access to the police records, the voicemail transcripts. If this gets out, if people learn I chose a business meeting over my brother's life." "Stop." Aurora stepped over the broken glass, reaching for him. "You were 22, James, barely more than a kid yourself, trying to handle responsibilities no one should have at that age. I failed him." The words seemed torn from his soul. "Just like I'm failing you and Mason now." "No," she grabbed his arms, forcing him to look at her. "You are not failing us. You're fighting for us, and I won't let Thomas use your past to destroy that." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Before either could think better of it, Aurora pulled him into a fierce embrace. He stiffened for a moment, then melted into it, his arms wrapping around her as if she were a lifeline in a storm. They stood like that for long moments, his face buried in her hair, her hands steady on his back. The scent of her perfume mixed with his cologne, creating something new and undefined between them. "I should step away," he murmured against her hair, "give Thomas what he wants, protect you from the scandal." Aurora pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "Don't you dare. We're in this together now, remember?" The intensity of her gaze seemed to steady him. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb tracing her jawline with exquisite gentleness. "Together," he repeated softly. The moment stretched, charged with possibility. Their faces drew closer, breath mingling, hearts racing. Just as their lips were about to meet, Aurora's phone shattered the silence with an incoming call. The number was unknown. With trembling fingers, she answered and put it on speaker. "Mommy?" Mason's voice, small and scared, filled the room. Aurora's knees buckled, but James caught her, supporting her weight as they both listened. "Baby, are you okay?" Her voice shook with emotion. "Daddy says we're moving." "I don't want to move, Mommy. I want to see you." Before she could respond, Thomas's voice cut in, smooth and menacing. "Say goodbye, Mason. Mommy's new boyfriend has some problems he needs to deal with." The line went dead. Aurora stared at the phone in horror while James's arms tightened around her protectively. The broken glass at their feet caught the morning light, sending fractured rainbows across the walls, beautiful and dangerous, like everything in their lives right now. "He's using Mason to get to us," James said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "What do we do?" Aurora looked up at him, seeing her own fear and determination reflected in his eyes. "We fight back. But first," he pulled away slightly, his expression intense. "Aurora, if you want me to step back, to handle this legally but from a distance, I'll understand. Thomas is going to make this ugly, and you and Mason don't deserve to be caught in the crossfire of my past." She reached up, removing his glasses gently. Without them, his eyes looked younger, more vulnerable. Your past is part of who you are, James. And who you are is someone I've come to. She paused, the word trust feeling inadequate for what was growing between them. He caught her hand as she lowered it, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent shivers down her spine. Tell me what you want me to do, he whispered against her skin. I'll follow your lead. The intimate gesture, combined with the weight of his words, made her heart race. This man, who commanded an empire, was putting himself completely in her hands. I want you to be you, she said finally, the real you, not the CEO, not the perfect son, not the guilty brother, just you. The man who lets me sleep on his shoulder and fights for what's right and isn't afraid to be broken sometimes. Their foreheads touched, an achingly tender gesture. Around them, the empty house seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if its master would finally allow it to become a home. Then let's show Thomas what happens when he threatens the people we love, James said softly, the words carrying the weight of a vow. Outside, Seattle's eternal clouds began to break, sending shafts of sunlight through the windows. The broken glass at their feet caught the light, transforming from hazard to art, much like how their broken pieces were slowly forming something beautiful and strong. The battle lines were drawn, but this time, they would face them together. The legal documents spread across James's home office told a story of calculated cruelty. Bank statements, property records, and court filings revealed how methodically Thomas had worked to isolate Aurora from Mason. But it was the newest document that made her blood run cold, custody transfer papers for Mason's enrollment in a private school in Chicago, dated for next week. He's moving up the timeline, Aurora whispered, her fingers tracing Mason's name on the paper. We're running out of time. James looked up from his laptop, dark circles under his eyes betraying sleepless nights spent building their case. His jacket was discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up, tie long gone, a man at war with time itself. Not if I can help it. He turned his screen toward her. Look at this. Thomas's company is hemorrhaging money. The Chicago move isn't just about Mason, he's running from financial collapse. How does that help us? Because desperate men make mistakes. James stood, moving to pour them both coffee from the expensive machine that had become their lifeline during these late-night strategy sessions. And Thomas just made a big one. The past week had transformed their relationship in unexpected ways. After the morning of broken glass and almost kisses, they'd fallen into a rhythm of working together, learning each other's habits and quirks. Aurora now knew that James pulled at his collar when frustrated, that he hummed classical music under his breath while thinking, that he took his coffee black with one sugar. He knew that she twisted her hair when worried, that she still carried Mason's favorite stuffed dinosaur in her purse, that she couldn't focus without music playing softly in the background. What mistake? She asked, accepting the coffee cup. Their fingers brushed in a way that had become both familiar and electric. He's been embezzling from his company's pension fund. My team found the trail. James sat on the edge of his desk, closer to her than strictly necessary. We can use this, Aurora, force him to negotiate before it goes public. Hope flared in her chest, but experience made her cautious. He'll fight back, use Adrian's story against you. Let him. James's voice was steel. I'm done letting my brother's memory be a weapon. Adrian deserved better than that, and so does Mason. Aurora stood, unable to contain her restless energy. The wall of windows showed Seattle's nightscape, a sea of lights mirroring the stars above. Somewhere out there, her son was probably getting ready for bed, maybe wondering why his mother hadn't fought harder to see him. Warm hands settled on her shoulders, and she leaned back instinctively into James's solid presence. What are you thinking? He asked softly, his breath stirring her hair. That I'm terrified. She turned to face him, staying within the circle of his arms, not just of losing Mason, but of hoping too much, of trusting too much. His eyes softened behind his glasses. I know. But you're not alone anymore. The simple statement held worlds of meaning. Over the past week, something had shifted between them, growing deeper than attraction, more complex than gratitude. Every late night spent working, every shared look, every casual touch had built a foundation of trust neither had expected. "Dance with me," James said suddenly. "What?" "Dance with me." He pulled out his phone, and soft piano music filled the room. "We've been staring at documents for hours, we need a break." "I don't really dance," she protested, even as he pulled her closer. "Neither do I." His smile was soft. "But sometimes you need to do something completely impractical just to stay sane." They swayed together, not really dancing so much as holding each other while the music played. Aurora rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat mix with the melody. His hand traced gentle patterns on her back, and she felt some of her tension begin to melt away. "Tell me about Mason," James murmured, "not the legal stuff, tell me about him." A smile touched her lips. "He loves dinosaurs, knows all their names, even the complicated ones. He has this laugh that just bubbles up from nowhere, like joy is too big to contain. And he's so smart, James, sometimes he asks questions that make me wonder if he's 5 or 50. Like what? Last time I saw him, he asked why the moon follows our car when we drive." The memory made her throat tight. "He said it must love us very much to never want to let us go." James's arms tightened around her. "We'll get him back, Aurora. I promise you." She pulled back enough to look at him, really look at him. In the soft lighting, she could see every line of worry, every moment of care that had etched itself onto his face. "Why did you really ask me to dance?" she whispered. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb tracing her jawline in what had become a familiar gesture. "Because every time I touch you, I feel more human, more real, less like the machine I became after Adrian died." The honesty in his voice made her heart ache. Before she could overthink it, she reached up and removed his glasses, setting them carefully aside. Without them, his eyes were impossibly vulnerable, showing every fragment of emotion he usually kept hidden. "James," she breathed, but whatever she was going to say was lost as he lowered his head to hers. This time, when their lips met, there was no phone call to interrupt them. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand, but when Aurora's hand slid into his hair, pulling him closer, it deepened into something more desperate, more real. They broke apart only when the need for air became urgent, but didn't move far. James rested his forehead against hers, both of them breathing heavily. "I've wanted to do that since the airport," he admitted quietly. "Even when I was drooling on your shoulder?" The attempt at humor couldn't hide the tremor in her voice. "Especially then." He smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You were so strong, even in sleep, so beautiful, even exhausted. I wanted to protect you, even though I could tell you didn't need protecting." "Maybe I do," she whispered. "Maybe we both do." The moment was broken by a chime from his laptop, an incoming email. Reality crashed back in as they remembered where they were, what they were fighting for. James reached for his glasses, but Aurora caught his hand. "Wait, just one more minute." He answered by kissing her again, softer this time, but no less meaningful. When they finally separated, something had changed between them, a line crossed, a promise made without words. "Whatever happens," James said, sliding his glasses back on, "this is real, you and me, this connection. It's not just about Mason or Thomas or making up for past mistakes. I need you to know that." Aurora straightened his collar, a gesture both domestic and intimate. "I know. And that's what terrifies me most of all." They turned back to the work at hand, but something had shifted in the atmosphere. Every accidental touch now carried more weight, every shared look held more meaning. Even the legal documents seemed different, no longer just a battle plan, but a path to a future neither had dared imagine before tonight. Outside, the moon hung full and bright over Seattle, following them all through the night, loving enough to never let go. The news broke at dawn: Caldwell Industries faces federal investigation. James's team had leaked the pension fund irregularities to the press, and the resulting chaos was immediate. Thomas's company stock plummeted, his investors panicked, and his plans for Chicago began to unravel. But Aurora couldn't celebrate, not when Thomas's latest text message glowed ominously on her phone: "If I'm going down, I'm taking everyone with me. Hope your new boyfriend is ready for the world to know exactly what happened the night his brother died." She stood in James's kitchen, watching him prepare their morning coffee with the easy familiarity they'd developed over the past 2 weeks since their kiss in his office. Something had shifted between them, a deepening of trust, a softening of boundaries. They hadn't defined it, both too focused on the legal battle ahead, but it was there in every shared glance, every casual touch. "You're thinking too loud," James said, sliding her coffee across the counter. He looked different in the morning light, softer somehow, his hair still damp from the shower, wearing a simple black sweater instead of his usual suit. "Thomas's threatening to release something about Adrian." She showed him the text. "Whatever he has, it's big enough that he thinks it will destroy you." James's hand tightened on his coffee cup, but his voice remained steady. "Let him. I'm done letting him use my brother as a weapon." "What aren't you telling me?" When he didn't respond, she moved closer, laying her hand over his. "James, whatever it is, we can face it together. But I need to know what we're up against." For a long moment, he just stared at their joined hands. Then, slowly, he pulled away and walked to the windows. Seattle stretched out below them, the morning sun painting the city in shades of gold and shadow. "The night Adrian died," he began, his voice tight with pain, "I didn't just miss his call. I knew he was in trouble, had known for weeks. Our father was getting worse, more controlling, more abusive. Adrian begged me to help him leave, to give him money to start over somewhere else. But you didn't. I thought I was protecting him." James's laugh was bitter. "Our father had threatened to destroy anyone who helped Adrian escape. I had just started building my company, was finally gaining independence. I told Adrian to be patient, to wait until I was stronger, more established. I promised I'd help him then." He turned back to face her, and the raw anguish in his eyes made her heart ache. The voicemail he left, it wasn't just a cry for help. It was goodbye. "He told me he understood why I couldn't help him, that he didn't blame me, said he was proud of what I was becoming, even if it meant leaving him behind." Aurora moved to him then, drawn by the pain in his voice. "Oh, James. The police ruled it suicide, but they never found his body, just his jacket on the bridge, his wallet in the water." His voice cracked. "For months afterward, I looked for him everywhere, hired private investigators, searched homeless shelters. Part of me still hopes that he's alive somewhere, that he found the freedom I was too cowardly to give him." James removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. "If Thomas releases the voicemail, exposes how I chose my company over my own brother. Then we'll face it," Aurora said firmly. "Together." Before he could respond, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made her answer it on speaker. "Mrs. Monroe," a woman's voice, professional but kind, "this is Nurse Lancaster from Seattle Children's Hospital. I'm calling about your son, Mason." The world seemed to tilt sideways. James was beside her instantly, supporting her as her knees weakened. "What happened?" she managed to ask. "Mason was admitted an hour ago with a severe allergic reaction. His father brought him in, but," the nurse hesitated. "Mr. Caldwell left shortly after, saying he had an urgent business matter. Given the circumstances, we felt it appropriate to contact you. I'll be right there." Aurora's hands shook as she ended the call. "He's allergic to peanuts, Thomas knows this. He's always known this. I'll drive." James was already moving, grabbing his keys and wallet. As they rushed to the elevator, he made a quick call. "Victoria, clear my schedule and get me everything you can on Thomas's movements this morning. Something's not right." The drive to the hospital was a blur of fear and rage. Aurora kept checking her phone, but there were no messages from Thomas, no explanations, no threats, just silence. They found Mason in a private room, small and pale against the white sheets, but awake. His face lit up when he saw Aurora, and suddenly she was running, gathering him in her arms as tears streamed down her face. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice hoarse but strong, "you came." "Of course I came, baby. I'll always come for you." She pulled back just enough to check him over, cataloging every detail of his precious face. "Daddy said you were too busy," Mason said, his lower lip trembling. "He said you didn't want to see me anymore." The words felt like knives in her heart. "That's not true, sweetheart. I always want to see you, always." Mason's eyes drifted past her to where James stood quietly in the doorway. "Are you my mommy's friend? The one Daddy doesn't like?" James stepped forward slowly, his expression gentle. "My name's James, and yes, I'm your mom's friend. Do you like dinosaurs?" The simple question, so innocent amidst all the chaos, made both adults smile. James moved closer, pulling up a chair beside the bed. "I do. In fact, I have a whole collection of dinosaur books in my library. Would you like to see them sometime?" Mason's eyes widened. "Really? Even the big ones with all the long names?" "Especially those." Aurora watched their interaction, her heart so full it hurt. But the moment was shattered by the arrival of her lawyer, looking grave. "Mrs. Monroe, we need to talk, now." In the hallway, the lawyer's words hit like physical blows. "Thomas has filed emergency papers claiming you caused Mason's allergic reaction during an unauthorized visit. He has security camera footage showing you near his house yesterday, footage she knew was fabricated because she'd been with James all day. He planned this," she realized, horror dawning. "He deliberately exposed Mason to peanuts just to set me up." "The hospital records work in our favor," her lawyer said. "They show Mr. Caldwell leaving his severely ill child without proper cause. But we need to move fast, he's still pushing for the Chicago transfer next week." Back in the room, Mason had fallen asleep, his small hand clutching James's finger. The sight made Aurora's chest tight with emotions she couldn't name. "How can anyone use their child like this?" she whispered. "How can he hurt his own son just to punish me?" James's free hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Because he's desperate, and desperate men don't see what they're destroying until it's too late." The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with meaning. Outside the hospital windows, storm clouds gathered, promising rain. But inside this room, watching her son sleep peacefully while holding hands with a man who'd moved mountains to help her, Aurora felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. "We're going to end this," she said firmly, "not just for Mason, but for Adrian too. No more letting the past control our future." James looked at her then, his eyes full of something that looked remarkably like love. "Together? Together." And as the first raindrops hit the window, they began to plan their final move against the man who tried to break them both. The courthouse steps loomed before them, gray stone turned silver by the early morning light. Aurora gripped James's hand tightly, drawing strength from his steady presence. 2 days had passed since Mason's hospital visit, and everything had accelerated into this moment, an emergency custody hearing that would determine not just Mason's future, but all of theirs. "Ready?" James asked softly, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. Before she could answer, a commotion erupted at the bottom of the steps. Thomas had arrived, surrounded by reporters, playing his part perfectly: the concerned father, the wronged businessman, the victim of corporate espionage and personal vendetta. "Mr. Caldwell, what do you say to allegations that you deliberately endangered your son's life? Is it true Warrington Industries orchestrated your company's collapse? Any comment on the federal investigation into pension fund fraud?" Thomas's practiced smile never wavered. "All I care about is protecting my son from those who would use him as a pawn in their corporate games. The truth will come out today." His eyes met Aurora's across the crowd, and the malice in them made her shiver. But then James stepped forward, subtly placing himself between them, and something flickered in Thomas's expression: uncertainty, perhaps even fear. Inside the courtroom, tension crackled like static before a storm. Mason sat with a court-appointed guardian, his dinosaur T-shirt bright against the somber wooden benches. When he saw Aurora, he started to wave, but Thomas's sharp look stopped him. "All rise," the bailiff called, and Judge Catherine Martinez entered, her expression giving nothing away. What followed was a battle, not just of evidence, but of narratives. Thomas's lawyer painted a picture of a devoted father protecting his son from an unstable mother and her wealthy, possibly dangerous new boyfriend. They projected the fabricated security footage, showed manufactured evidence of Aurora's supposed visit before Mason's allergic reaction. But then came their turn. "Your Honor," Aurora's lawyer began, "we have evidence that Mr. Caldwell deliberately exposed his own son to a known allergen, then abandoned him at the hospital to fabricate evidence against my client." The hospital records appeared on screens around the courtroom, timestamps showing Thomas's hasty departure, nurses' notes about his suspicious behavior, and, most damning of all, traces of peanut residue found on Mason's lunch container, packed by his father that morning. Thomas's composure cracked slightly. "This is absurd, I would never." Furthermore, the lawyer continued, "we have proof that Mr. Caldwell's company is facing federal investigation for pension fund fraud. His sudden desire to move to Chicago is not about Mason's welfare, but about evading justice." Financial documents filled the screens, each one a nail in Thomas's professional coffin. But he had one card left to play. "Your Honor," his lawyer interjected, "while these financial matters are concerning, they're separate from the custody issue. Our real concern is Mr. Warrington's involvement, and his history of familial negligence." Aurora felt James stiffen beside her as Adrian's name entered the courtroom. "We have evidence," Thomas's lawyer continued, "that Mr. Warrington's younger brother died under suspicious circumstances, a death Mr. Warrington could have prevented." The courtroom fell silent as a recording began to play, Adrian's last voicemail. James's hands clenched into fists as his brother's young voice filled the room. I can't take it anymore. Dad's getting worse, I need you. Please." But then something unexpected happened, the recording continued past where it should have ended, capturing a conversation never meant to be heard. "Did you edit out the parts about the abuse?" Thomas's voice, clearly recorded recently. "Yes, sir, nothing about your father's business with heirs or the connections to." "Good. This version makes Warrington look guilty enough. Release it." The courtroom erupted in chaos. Judge Martinez called for order as Thomas's face drained of color. "Your Honor," James's voice cut through the noise, steady and clear, "I request permission to address the court." The judge nodded, and James stood. Without his usual suit armor, he wore a simple dark sweater today, he looked more human, more vulnerable. 13 years ago, I failed my brother. I chose security over courage, business over family. Adrian needed me to be brave, and I wasn't." His voice caught slightly. "But that failure taught me something precious, that love means fighting for those who can't fight for themselves, that sometimes the biggest risk is not taking one at all." He turned to face Mason directly. "I couldn't save my brother, but I can help save this little boy from growing up in the shadow of a father's cruelty, not because I'm trying to atone, but because it's right." "Objection." Thomas shot to his feet. "This emotional manipulation is nothing compared to poisoning your own son." Judge Martinez cut in sharply. "Mr. Caldwell, sit down." The judge's eyes swept the courtroom, taking in everyone, Mason clutching his dinosaur toy, Aurora with tears streaming down her face, James standing tall but vulnerable, Thomas seething in his expensive suit. "This court has seen enough," she declared. "Mr. Caldwell's actions show a pattern of manipulation and disregard for his son's welfare, the fabricated evidence, the deliberate endangerment of the child, the attempted character assassination, all point to a father putting vengeance above his son's well-being." She turned to Aurora. "Mrs. Monroe has demonstrated consistent commitment to her child's welfare, even in the face of extraordinary obstacles. Furthermore, she has shown wisdom in accepting help and support, prioritizing her son's needs over pride." Mason's face lit up as he began to understand what was happening. The judge continued, her voice firm. Custody is hereby awarded to Aurora Monroe, with Mr. Caldwell's visitation rights to be determined after completion of both the federal investigation and mandatory counseling. The gavel's crack echoed like thunder. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Thomas, his careful facade finally cracking, lunged toward Aurora. But before anyone could react, a small figure darted between them, Mason, arms spread wide, protecting his mother. "Don't hurt Mommy," he cried, his voice carrying the simple courage of a child's love. Thomas froze, something breaking in his expression as he truly saw his son for the first time, not as a possession to fight over, but as a human being he'd wounded deeply. Security officers moved in, but the damage was done. Mason ran to Aurora, who scooped him up in her arms, holding him close as years of fear and longing poured out in tears of relief. James stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Mason's back. The boy turned to him with tear-stained cheeks and asked, "Can we see the dinosaur books now?" The simple question broke the tension, drawing watery laughs from everyone nearby. James's smile was radiant as he answered, "Anytime you want, buddy. Anytime you want." As they left the courthouse, the rain that had threatened all morning finally began to fall, not the usual Seattle drizzle, but a cleansing downpour that seemed to wash away years of pain and fear. Mason, secure in his mother's arms, reached out to take James's hand. And in that moment, something new was born, not just a victory or an ending, but the beginning of a family forged in storm and strengthened by love. Outside, reporters clamored for statements, cameras flashed, and questions flew, but inside their little bubble, only one thing mattered: they were together, they were safe, they were home. 1 month after the courthouse battle, James's library had transformed from a pristine sanctuary of leather-bound classics to a cheerful chaos of dinosaur books and children's laughter. Mason lay on his stomach on the Persian rug, surrounded by open books, while James sat cross-legged beside him, explaining the differences between Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. Aurora watched from the doorway, her heart full at the sight. The past month had brought changes she'd never dared hope for: Mason back home, Thomas facing federal charges, and, most surprisingly, this growing sense of family with James. "Mom!" Mason called, spotting her. "James knows everything about T-Rex. Did you know they had feathers?" "Is that so?" She joined them on the floor, smoothing Mason's unruly curls. "And what else has James been teaching you?" "That some things that look scary can actually be protecting you," Mason said seriously. "Like how T-Rex moms were fierce because they loved their babies." James caught her eye over Mason's head, and the tenderness in his gaze made her breath catch. They hadn't defined their relationship yet, taking things slowly for Mason's sake, but moments like this made her wonder if they were fooling anyone but themselves. "Hey, buddy," James said, checking his watch, "it's almost time for your video call with Dad." Mason's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. The court-mandated virtual visits with Thomas were still awkward, but their son faced them with remarkable resilience. "Can you stay while I talk to him?" Mason asked James, his small hand clutching the older man's sleeve. "If your mom says it's okay." Aurora nodded, touched by their growing bond. As Mason settled at the desk with the laptop, she and James stood nearby, close enough to supervise, but giving him space. "He's doing better," James murmured, his hand finding hers naturally. "The nightmares about the hospital are less frequent. Thanks to you," she squeezed his fingers. "Your patience with him, these afternoons in the library, they mean everything." Before he could respond, Thomas's face appeared on screen. Even through the video feed, the changes in him were evident. Prison awaiting trial had stripped away his polished exterior, leaving someone almost unrecognizable. "Hi, Dad," Mason said quietly. "Hey, champ." Thomas's eyes flickered to where Aurora and James stood, something complex passing across his face. "How are you?" "Good. James is teaching me about dinosaurs. Did you know T-Rex had feathers?" A muscle twitched in Thomas's jaw. That's great, son. Listen, I need to tell you something important." Aurora tensed, but James's steady presence kept her grounded. "I'm going away for a while," Thomas continued. "The things I did, they were wrong, all of them. And now I have to face the consequences." Mason frowned. "Like when I broke Mom's favorite mug and had to apologize and help clean up?" "Something like that, but bigger." Thomas's laugh was hollow. "Much bigger. But I want you to know, what happened wasn't your fault, or your mom's. I got lost somewhere along the way, forgot what really mattered." Tears glinted in his eyes, real ones, not the calculated displays from the courthouse. "I'm sorry, Mason, for everything. For hurting you, for lying about your mom, for not being the father you deserved." Mason was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then he said something that left all the adults stunned. "It's okay, Dad. Everyone makes mistakes, that's what James says. The important thing is learning from them." Thomas looked directly at James then, years of rivalry and hatred dissolving into something like grudging respect. "He's right. Keep teaching him that, Warrington, and take care of them both." The call ended soon after, leaving an emotional silence in its wake. Mason turned to Aurora, his eyes wise beyond his years. "Mom, can we have mac and cheese for dinner? Your special recipe?" "Of course, baby." She kissed his forehead, marveling at his capacity for love and forgiveness. "Why don't you go wash up while I get started?" Once Mason had left, James pulled her into his arms. She went willingly, letting out a shaky breath against his chest. "You okay?" he asked softly. "Better than okay." She looked up at him, seeing her future in his eyes. "Just processing how much has changed. A few months ago, I was falling asleep on a stranger's shoulder, desperate and alone, and now. His thumb traced her cheekbone, a gesture that had become precious and familiar. "Now I have everything I never dared wish for, Mason's home, Thomas finally facing his demons, and you." She touched his face, feeling him lean into her palm. "You've become something I can't imagine living without." The truth of the words scared her even as she said them. James must have sensed her fear because he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Then don't," he whispered. "Stay, both of you. Make this house a home. Let me wake up every morning to Mason's dinosaur facts and your coffee addiction. Let me love you both the way you deserve to be loved. Are you sure? Taking on a ready-made family, dealing with all our baggage." He silenced her with a kiss, soft but full of promise. "I've never been more sure of anything." The moment was broken by Mason's voice from the kitchen. "Mom! James! Can we eat in the library? I want to show you this cool picture of a velociraptor." They broke apart, laughing, but their hands remained linked. "No eating near the books," they called back in unison, then shared a look of surprised delight at their unconscious synchronization. Later that evening, after Mason was asleep in his new room, dinosaur-themed, of course, Aurora and James stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The night was clear for once, stars visible above Seattle's lights. "I got a letter today," James said quietly, "from Adrian's old roommate at boarding school." Aurora turned to him, hearing the weight in his voice. "He's alive," James continued, his voice thick with emotion, "living in Aurora under a different name. The roommate helped him escape that night, gave him money I'd sent for school supplies. He's been painting, has a family of his own." "Oh, James." She held him as the tears finally came, 13 years of guilt and grief pouring out under the stars. "He followed my career," James continued, his voice rough, "saw what happened with Thomas in the news. The roommate says Adrian's proud of who I've become, that he never blamed me, just like he said in the voicemail. Of course he didn't. You were both victims of your father, just like Mason was of Thomas. He wants to meet, not right away, but someday." James pulled back enough to look at her. Would you and Mason come with me when I do?" The question held so much more than a simple request, it was an invitation to share not just his present and future, but his past as well, to be family in every sense of the word. Always, she whispered, sealing the promise with a kiss. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the sky, a sign, perhaps, that sometimes the universe conspired to heal broken hearts in the most unexpected ways. Through the open balcony doors, they could hear Mason's soft breathing from his room, peaceful and secure. They had all been lost once, a broken-hearted boy who faked his death to find freedom, a guilt-ridden man who built walls around his heart, a mother fighting impossible odds to protect her child. But now, somehow, they had found their way to this moment, this future, this love, and it was more than enough. 1 year later, Aurora found herself on another airplane, but everything else had changed. Mason sat between her and James, enthusiastically explaining dinosaur migration patterns to anyone who would listen. Her fingers absently played with the elegant engagement ring on her left hand. James had proposed 3 months ago during a quiet moment in their library, with Mason's enthusiastic blessing. They were flying to Sydney, where Adrian waited to reunite with his brother after 14 years apart. The universe, it seemed, had a poetry all its own. "Mom," Mason whispered, tugging at her sleeve, "is James scared to see his brother?" Aurora glanced at James, who had fallen into an uneasy sleep, his glasses slightly askew. "A little, baby. Sometimes the things we want most are also the things that scare us most, like when you were scared to try the big slide at the park, but you really wanted to. Exactly like that." She kissed his forehead, marveling at his intuitive understanding. "Then I'll hold his hand," Mason decided, like he held mine at the slide. The simple declaration brought tears to her eyes. Over the past year, she'd watched her son and the man she loved build a bond that went beyond biology, a connection built on dinosaur books, midnight comfort during thunderstorms, and unconditional acceptance. James stirred, blinking awake. "Are we there?" "A few more hours." Aurora answered, reaching across Mason to straighten James's glasses. "Someone's been watching over you, though." Mason beamed. "I protected you while you slept, just like T-Rex protects their family." James's laugh was soft but genuine, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "My hero." Speaking of protection, he pulled out a small wrapped package from his carry-on. "I was saving this for when we landed, but maybe now is better." Mason's eyes lit up as he carefully unwrapped what turned out to be a well-worn sketchbook. "What is it?" "Adrian's old drawings," James explained, his voice thick with emotion. "He used to draw dinosaurs too, look at the date. He was just about your age." Together, they paged through childish sketches that somehow captured the same passion Mason held for his prehistoric friends. Aurora watched them, remembering another flight where she'd been too exhausted and heartbroken to hope. Now, hope filled every moment. The Sydney airport was a blur of activity, but they moved through it in their own bubble of anticipation. Adrian had chosen the meeting place, a small cafe overlooking the harbor, away from curious eyes. As they approached, Aurora felt James's hand tighten in hers. Through the window, they could see a man with familiar blue-gray eyes, his hair longer than James's, but with the same slight wave. He wasn't alone, a woman with kind eyes sat beside him, and 2 young children colored at the table. Uncle James. The girl, about Mason's age, spotted them first. "Daddy, they're here." What followed was a symphony of emotion, tears and laughter, accusations and forgiveness, 14 years of lost time crashing into present joy. Adrian hugged his brother fiercely, both men breaking down as years of guilt and grief washed away. "I'm so sorry," James kept saying. "I should have been braver." "You were exactly as brave as you could be then," Adrian replied. "And look how brave you are now." The children, innocent of the weight of history, bonded immediately over shared dinosaur enthusiasm. Mason showed Adrian's daughter the sketchbook, and soon they were comparing notes on favorite species, their chatter filling the cafe with life. Later, as the sun set over Sydney Harbor, the expanded family gathered at Adrian's home. The adults sat on the deck, watching the children play in the garden, their laughter a healing balm. "Thank you," Adrian said quietly to Aurora, for helping my brother find his heart again." She smiled, watching James teach the kids how to roar like a proper T-Rex. "He helped me find my strength. We healed each other." "And Mason?" Adrian's wife asked. "How is he handling everything?" "Better than any of us." Aurora's eyes followed her son, seeing not just the happy child he was now, but the strong man he would become. "He taught us all about forgiveness, about seeing the good in people, even when they've lost sight of it themselves." The conversation paused as James joined them, wrapping his arms around Aurora from behind. The simple gesture spoke volumes about how far they'd come, from strangers on a plane to partners in every sense. "I got a letter from Thomas yesterday," Aurora said softly. "He's completed his rehabilitation program, wants to know if Mason would be willing to see him in person." "What are you thinking?" James asked, no judgment in his voice. "I'm thinking that healing comes in many forms, that Mason deserves the chance to know his father is trying to be better." She leaned back against James's chest. "And I'm thinking how grateful I am that love isn't a finite resource, that there's room in his heart for all of us." Adrian raised his glass in a toast. "To second chances, to finding home in unexpected places, to family, not just the one we're born with, but the one we choose and build and fight for. To love," James added, his voice thick with emotion, "the kind that breaks down walls and builds bridges instead." Mason ran up then, climbing into Aurora's lap despite being almost too big for it. "Mom, can we sleep under the stars tonight? Adrian says you can see different constellations here." "Different stars," Aurora mused, "same love." As night fell over Sydney, two families merged into one, sat together under an unfamiliar sky. They shared stories of the past and dreams of the future, their voices mixing with the sound of waves and distant city life. Aurora looked around at this tableau, Mason and his new cousin sharing dinosaur facts, Adrian and James rebuilding their bond word by word, their partners watching with understanding hearts. She thought about endings and beginnings, about how sometimes the worst moments in life led to the best ones. Most of all, she thought about that fateful flight when exhaustion and despair had led her to sleep on a stranger's shoulder, how that simple moment of vulnerability had started a chain reaction of healing and love that now stretched across oceans. "Penny, for your thoughts," James whispered in her ear. "Just thinking about how far we've come, and how excited I am to see where we're going." His kiss was soft and full of promise. "Together?" "Together," she agreed, "all of us." Above them, a shooting star streaked across the Sydney sky, not an ending, but a continuation, another light in the darkness, another story beginning, another chance to prove that love, in all its forms, was the greatest force for healing in the universe. And in that moment, under strange stars with familiar hearts, they were exactly where they were meant to be. The end. 5 years later, the Seattle-bound plane hummed quietly as passengers settled in for the overnight flight. In first class, a teenage Mason sat next to his 3-year-old sister, Isabella, patiently explaining why pterodactyls could fly despite their size. His dinosaur obsession had evolved into a passion for paleontology, but he still loved sharing his knowledge with others, especially his little sister. Behind them, Aurora and James watched their children with quiet contentment. Isabella's dark curls matched her mother's, while her calculating gray eyes were all Warrington. She had her father wrapped around her tiny finger from the moment she was born, just as Mason had captured his heart years before. They were returning from their annual visit to Sydney, where Adrian's family had grown to include a third child. The cousins were now inseparable despite the distance, and video calls between continents were a weekly tradition. "Remember this flight route?" James whispered to Aurora, squeezing her hand. She smiled, touching the elegant locket he'd given her for their 4th anniversary. Inside were 2 photos, one of her sleeping on his shoulder during that first fateful flight, secretly captured by a flight attendant who'd later send it to them, and another of their whole family at Mason's middle school graduation last month. "How could I forget? Best mistake I ever made, falling asleep on you." "Not a mistake," he corrected softly, "destiny." Mason turned around in his seat, grinning. "Dad, you're being sappy again." The word "dad" still brought joy to James's face. Mason had started using it 3 years ago after James officially adopted him. Thomas, who had worked hard to reform himself, had given his blessing. He remained part of Mason's life now in a healthier way and would be attending his son's upcoming science fair, where Mason planned to present his research on new dinosaur fossil discoveries. Speaking of Sappy, Aurora said, "Did you tell them about Lucia?" Mason blushed. "Mom. Who's Lucia?" Isabella piped up, always eager for family gossip despite her young age. "Just a girl in my paleontology club," Mason mumbled, but his red cheeks told a different story. "She's coming to dinner next week," Aurora informed her husband with a wink, "our boy's first crush." "Not my first," Mason corrected, then immediately regretted it as both parents raised their eyebrows. Isabella giggled. "Mason's got a girlfriend." "Hey, Bella," Mason deflected expertly, "want to hear about the new dinosaur they discovered in Argentina?" As the children returned to their discussion, James pulled Aurora closer. "We did good, didn't we?" "We did amazing," she agreed, watching Mason demonstrate fossil excavation techniques using his sister's stuffed animal. The plane banked gently, and through the window, they could see the stars twinkling above the clouds. Somewhere below, Seattle waited with all its memories, the courthouse where they'd won their freedom, the library where their family had truly begun, the balcony where they'd shared their dreams. Isabella soon fell asleep against her brother's shoulder, clutching the stuffed T-Rex that was once his. Mason carefully adjusted her blanket before pulling out his latest paleontology journal, Every Inch the Protective Big Brother. "Full circle," James murmured, noting the parallel. Aurora kissed him softly. "No, my love, this is just another beginning." And as the plane carried them home through the starlit sky, they knew she was right. Every day brought new adventures, new challenges, new chances to choose love and courage over fear. Their story hadn't ended with "happily ever after," it had evolved into something richer, deeper, and more real. After all, the best love stories aren't about the destination, they're about all the beautiful, unexpected moments of falling asleep on strangers' shoulders and waking up to find your heart finally home. Based on this moving story of love, redemption, and second chances, I'd like to ask a profound question for reflection. If you were in Aurora's shoes, would you be able to trust again after such a deep betrayal? Would the fear of getting hurt again be worth more than the chance to find true love and build a family? Think about it, sometimes our greatest fears prevent us from experiencing our greatest joys. What would your choice be?